Okay, so we are going to be, pop on here. Hi there. We are going to be talking about chapter 9 for this module, and it deals with relationships. So we're going to be talking about marriage and divorce and same sex relationships and lat couples and all of that fun kind of stuff in this chapter. The module is the sixth one, and believe it or not, we have like 4 more left, which means that's like 2 weeks. Next module, I will be discussing your final project and what is expected of you for that. So look forward to that. Remember that the exam is open until Sunday evening. So you have until then. Don't wait until the last minute to get it done. That is a typical mom comment, but don't do it. Okay. All right. So yeah, go ahead. I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, get out of here, get into here. This is the second time that I've had to record this because my dog decided to bark in the background. All right, so talking about relationships in chapter 9. Like I said, we're going to be talking about marriage, cohabitation, same-sex couples, divorce and remarriage, widowhood, and what are some of the psychological perspectives on long-term relationships. This is all within marriage and intimate relationships. And then we'll also be talking about grandparents and their roles toward the end of the chapter. So these are just some facts, and they're a little bit older, the older facts being from 2015, but that about 124 million adults in the United States are married and living with their spouse. So that's about half of the 18 and over population. That's from 2015. As far as the median age of marriage, we're seeing about 25 to almost 26 years old for women, and almost 28, or not almost, but 28 years old for men. By 40, 84% of all women are married. About 65 and over, about 70% of men are married compared to 45% of women. And I want you to think about that. Why do you think that there is that disparity? It would make sense that if it was 70% of men, then it should be 70% of women, right? But if we're seeing that women live longer than men, more men are going to be married over the age of 65 than women, because there are going to be more women over that age. Okay. So yeah, the Defense of Marriage Act is what was enacted was declared unconstitutional, not enacted. It was enacted in the Clinton administration and declared unconstitutional in 2013. And this was the act that allowed for same-sex marriage. So they called it DOMA. That's the acronym for it. So that happened in 2013. So we started to see some of these figures start to come in for same-sex marriage. Okay. Advantages that we might see for both partners in marriage: about a 9 to 15% reduction in mortality among older adults for married men and women, and greater happiness and a higher quality of life for both partners. Many researchers thought that that was just a one-sided happiness and higher quality of life, but actually we have started to see that it actually is for both partners. The 9 to 15% reduction in mortality among older adults. Think about the fact that you have a partner who would be an accountability partner, also a partner in making sure that you're, other than being accountable, making sure that your health is okay. If something should happen, that partner is there and can get the person to medical assistance quicker than if they were alone. So all of those things can go into that 9 to 15% reduction concept. Cohabitation: about 8 million older adults are cohabiting in 2005, which is up from the number in 1960 of being about 500,000, or close to 500,000 individuals who are, of course, that's a big rounding up, isn't it? So let's say 439,000 individuals in 1960 who are cohabiting. 50 to 60% of all marriages are preceded by cohabitation. So meaning that those individuals who are cohabiting, about 50 to 60% of them end up getting married. We are now also seeing an increase of having children in those cohabitation situations, because people just are not getting married. They're just living together and having children. 197,000 in 1960 to 3.25 million couples in 2015. Increasingly likely to involve older adults. So we look at that in the sense of individuals who have maybe lost their spouses or their partners, or have divorced, and they have decided that they don't necessarily want to get remarried, but they want to cohabit and live together. There is this thing called the cohabitation effect, where we have higher divorce rates among couples who cohabitate before becoming engaged. Individuals who might be serial cohabitators, meaning they live with somebody for a number of years and then they break up, and then we have another living together situation, and then they break up. So we might see more of a higher divorce rate in those situations. And chapter 9's assignment, the written assignment, is actually about this concept, the lat couple, the living apart but together couple, where older adults might prefer to actually continue to live on their own and living in their own separate residences, but having an intimate relationship with somebody. You'll be reading an article on that, and you'll be answering some questions. So yeah, that's it's an interesting concept. This is just a chart showing what some of the relationships that women aged 15 to 44 in the United States in 95, 2002, and 2006 to 2010. And so where we see cohabitation on the rise, but marriage on the decline. And a decision to actually not get married. So your darker is your more recent statistics, where you have more individuals deciding not to get married, and less individuals deciding to get married, with more individuals deciding just to live together. As I stated before with DOMA, this is where we look at same-sex couples, and not just necessarily within the sense of marriage, but the sense of being together. This is just an estimation of same-sex households in the United States. It's really quite likely an underestimate of individuals. And one of the reasons that we don't necessarily have a lot of statistics or information on the exact numbers of same-sex couples is because of the stigma. Even though some individuals have accepting friends and family, there are other individuals who are living under the stigma of not being out about their relationship, especially not a same-sex relationship. The dynamics are similar to heterosexual couples, and I feel silly for having to say that, but it is stated. This little statement here, that individuals may be more likely to break up than opposite sex couples or opposite sex partners. Many times, that information is based on the fact that before 2013, those individuals were just living together. And for some, marriage is marriage, and that's a union, and many don't want to break that. So that might be one of the reasons why we see information prior to that where individuals were breaking up, because there wasn't that solidification of that union. So speaking of divorce and remarriage, about 10% of the US adult population is divorced. Average marriage lasts about 8 years, which doesn't seem like very long. The divorce rate is declining. Now, it used to be where they would say it's not one out of two marriages. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that statistic used. So yes, so many times the cause or the effect of divorce is infidelity. There might be issues that are tied with divorcing, which might be where during the process they allow the other individual to save face, meaning to have a divorce that is on the face, civil, and just saying, okay, you know what, let's just part ways. There might be so people don't want to be identified as the bad spouse. I guess that's the way I'm trying to get to this. 9% of children live in home of the divorced parent. And obviously, if you are living in the conflicted home, it can be worse. They are a lot of domestic relation courts have what's called mediation. It allows couples to mediate their dispute as opposed to just outright going full force divorce. And the divorce is the end result in many of those mediations. It's not a means to keep the couples together. It's a means to help the couples reach that decision on if there are children involved, what is going to be the visitation, what's going to be the living arrangements, if you've got marital assets, what is going to be, who's going to get the dog, that type of stuff. Mediators, and typically they're judges or magistrates, they're there to help with those situations. There are some psychological aspects of divorce. Obviously, the practical consequences of what's going to happen. When somebody divorces, who's leaving the relationship, who doesn't get the house, who doesn't get the car, just all of those. The custody of children, as I said. Poorer health might be an issue where an individual who is in a divorce might start having some health issues. There might be some substance abuse as well, or some more negative life effects or events that occur. And then we have widowhood, and that is something that we talk about a lot in the older adult population. About 14 million widows in the United States. 76% of those 14 million are 65 and over. We grow older, we lose a spouse. 73% of women 85 and over are widows, and that goes hand in hand with that whole concept of women tend to live longer than men. However, men in widowhood are more prone to depression than women are when they lose their spouse. Okay. And this is obviously talking about a heterosexual relationship. There might be those anniversary reactions, and those can go on. Research has shown that those can go on for more than 35 years. And that's if somebody has lost somebody there are always going to be anniversary reactions coming around to the time of somebody's death, coming around to the time of somebody's stroke, coming around to the time of somebody's divorce. There are always going to be those reactions. And those reactions can be anywhere as far as emotions are concerned. Depression, sadness, anger, guilt, all of those things, survivor guilt. So there is the whole concept of the grief process, and we know that everybody's grief process is completely different, and we have varying reactions. This one, for giving an example of resilient grief, an individual who might appear to be dealing better with the grief process means that they might be a little more resilient in that process. But somebody who doesn't deal as well with the grief process, that we think that there might be some maladaptive behaviors. But in the long run, in all of our studies on grief and the grief process, it is a very deep and long-lasting process. and we don't know enough about it, but we are certainly, there's a lot of research out there about the different grief processes that individuals can go through. This just shows the widowhood effect, showing the higher risk of mortality for widows compared to married men and women. So a widower male versus a married male, as far as mortality is concerned, obviously you can see where there are higher mortality rates for males compared to the widowed male compared to the married male, and the same with the widowed female compared to the married female. So some perspectives on our long-term relationships. We might have some different theories on what those long-term relationships can bring to us. This is just what the book discusses. I'm not going to go over too much on these theories. You can just kind of go through these and just look at them. Same thing here as well. Okay. All right. Yeah. We don't want to think about individuals over the age of 65. Who wants to talk about anybody's sexuality, right? So, and I'm meaning by intercourse, okay? But obviously, we're human beings and it's going to occur. Many times, older adults are viewed as asexual. They are not viewed as sexual beings. And that's just something that we have to dispel because, as I said, we're all human beings and we all are going to want to have some kind of an intimate relationship with somebody, okay? All right. So families, parenthood, empty nest, that lovely empty nest, parent, adult, child relationship, siblings, and grandparents. Parenthood, there were about 4 million births in the United States in 2009, which is a decline, especially with women 30 years old. Women 30 and older showing actually an increase in the decision to have children. So women are thinking older to become a parent. I actually have a friend who is in her mid 40s now. She had a baby, and her baby's 17 months old. And the friend of mine is not much younger than I am. I'm 50, and so that's, some individuals have children late in life. Some individuals don't have children at all. So, yeah. Transitioning from into parenthood, it is part of the biopsychosocial process. So biological, there are going to be changes in the woman's body pre-parenthood and post-parenthood if that woman is the one who carries the baby. Psychological changes, we have a different identity when we become a parent. We're now responsible for somebody else. And parents feel that responsibility, and it never really ends, that responsibility. And then sociocultural, there are going to be different roles now for both parents, and also with their relationships with other family members. And those other family members can be their siblings or their parents themselves. So yes, this is just, you can just read through this. This is talking about women's dissatisfaction when they transition to parenthood, because some women, don't necessarily want to be parents or didn't want to be a parent. It might be due to an unplanned pregnancy, or they may not have had a good relationship with their own parents. They might also not want to assume the mother role. They might want to have more of a shared parenting role. So, but we, as the little box down there says, we have very gendered roles sometimes in relationships, and that is generational. So think about the silent stoic generation. These are the individuals who are 73, 74, 75 years old and up. The gendered roles that they have. I will use my my own parents as an example. My mom, she she cooked, she cleaned, she ironed, she did the laundry, she raised me, she raised my sister, she raised my brother. My dad went to work. Now my mom also worked, and she went back and got and obtained her degree in the late 60s, early 70s when she was pregnant with me. And my dad assumed the working husband role. Went to work, went to work, went to work, went to work, worked around the house, did chores around the house, very gendered roles. When my mom became ill, and it was apparent that it was a chronic illness that was terminal, she'd had to teach my dad how to do the laundry. And she also had to encourage my dad to learn how to cook because he didn't know how. He had no idea. He could make a sandwich and he could heat up soup. And that's pretty much the role that he still held until he had a stroke. And, but just very gendered roles. And she also taught him how to do the laundry. He did the laundry and he was taking that role on. But I know that he felt very, very much at a loss when she passed away for a number of reasons. But in the realm of, oh my gosh, I don't think I really realized how gendered our roles were, and what I kind of expected out of her and what I didn't really learn along the way. So that has to do with, some grief processes and loss and widowhood, obviously, but there is that whole concept of that doing gender within relationships. Okay. All right. So other research on parenthood, fatherhood is really a little less well studied. But we're starting to study it a little bit more. We don't have very much research with blended families. Some research shows that there might be greater problems between mothers and stepchildren versus fathers and stepchildren. So all of those little pieces are still being researched. And then the concept of the empty nest. We used to think that the empty nest was this most devastating concept. And for some of you in your midlife crisis assignment, you talked about the empty nest, about people like their kids have moved away and then they go and they get a tattoo or they go and buy things. It used to be thought that the empty nest was just this devastating event that affected women more than it affected the fathers, affected mothers more than it affected fathers in a heterosexual relationship. However, they are starting to see that this concept of the empty nest is allowing there to be more leisure time together, and also improving some sexual relations between the couples. It would be interesting now that we're going to start seeing more individuals within same-sex roles or same-sex relationships, what the empty nest syndrome looks like in a same-sex relationship. So, all right. Oh yeah. So this little box down here at the bottom, the sandwich generation. The sandwich generation is that generation where I, as a 50-year-old woman, I'll just use my parents again as an example. As a 50-year-old, 48-year-old woman at the time, I have children at home, and I was being a parent to them while I was also providing care for my ailing mother, and then last year for my ailing father. So I'm a sandwich generation because I would have times where I wasn't able to be there for my own children, to help them through the process of getting ready to lose Nana or getting ready to lose Papa. I had to be there for Nana or Papa during that time. There were many sleepless nights, and being a sandwich generation, I really wasn't in the throes of it. There are some individuals who have their parents living with them and are providing that hands-on care. I did not have that as a situation. Um, so there can be strains there as well. Parents are going to tend to help their children who are most in need. This goes along, oh yeah, this goes along with this whole concept of helicopter parenting. We also have a concept called lawnmower parenting. And helicopters obviously are going to hover over the child to make sure that they're doing okay. But the lawnmower parent is going to be the one who's going to mow down any adversity in front of the child to make sure that everything's okay for them. So these are just the different adult parent and the child relationships, or even the adult parent and the adult parent's parent relationship as well. Okay. We're starting to see some more younger adults still living at home longer than they had prior to. So if you look at these numbers here, where you've got men 18 to 24, women 18 to 24, and then men 25 to 34, and women 25 to 34. So we start to see in the 1960s where individuals are the percentage of individuals who are living with their parents tend to be a little bit greater as we grow older, as we move out towards the 2012 information, as opposed to where we see not as many young adults living with their parents in the 1960s, the 1970s. And we start to see in this little 1985-ish to 2012, we see a lot of little people living at home with their parents here. So it's kind of I don't want to call it a failure to launch, but it is a launch and then sometimes a return to living at the parent's house. And this is not necessarily in a caregiving role. This is in a role of, well, whatever the role is. It could be more support from the parents. It could be no job for the child. So yeah. You can just read this. Sibling relationships, they may be the longest relationship that you have in your life. So if you are blessed with having a sibling or having siblings, they're going to be the ones who are going to be in your life the longest, longer than your parents, longer than any kind of a significant other. So yeah, you can receive a tremendous amount of support from each other. My sister is 5 years ahead of me. My brother is almost 11 years ahead of me. And so when I was growing up, we didn't really have that close of a relationship, because by the time I was 12, my brother was, 20 some years old. He was already out of the house, already married. By the time I was 12, my sister was already a senior in high school, and she was getting ready to launch and get out of the house. So those relationships as we're growing up might not be as close if we have a larger amount of years between us. But as we get older, our relationships, my sister and my brother's relationships, became stronger. And it's because we needed to rely on one another during the process of our parents passing away. And you can support one another throughout that process, and you can also fight with one another throughout that process, obviously. There's also the concept of siblings who rely on each other greatly, and they may support each other much more, especially if the parents are not there to support them that much when they're young. And what I mean by that is, think of a parent who may be absent for whatever reason, if they are working a lot, if they are incarcerated, if they are not alive. Siblings are relied upon as a support system, as part of the family support system. So those are also those types of relationships. Okay. Then we get to grandparents. Grandparents, they're, you know, they're out there, and many of us have them still around. Some of us don't, but about 70 million individuals in the United States, although this is not official data, are grandparents. And there may be some generation or skip generation families where grandparents are providing the exclusive care for their grandchildren. And in that situation, you may see a custodial grandparent taking care of a grandchild, or a grandparent who has adopted a grandchild. So those are those types of relationships. The parents may have the biological parents may have a substance use problem, not abuse, substance use problem. They may be incarcerated. They may not be alive. It may have been deemed to be the benefit of the child to not be in that home. So there can be a number of issues. So that's one of those concepts of this skip generation family. And the different types of grandparents, and this is your flip grid assignment. This is the first choice and the second choice, where you're talking about how extensive the role is of grandparents when they get involved in the lives of the grandchildren. There can be individuals who are remote grandparents to very involved grandparents. And the central role is mostly the grandmother in that situation. And typically the maternal grandmother, so the mom's mom, who might be more of a central role with that. Those individuals who have good relationships with their parents tend to stay more in contact with the grandparents. So yeah. And then I also want you to think about this concept of social networking. And you may have a grandparent who is geographically distant, but is an involved grandparent because you're always FaceTiming them, or you're always calling them, okay, that's FaceTiming is an assumption that everybody has an Apple product. So bad Dr. Pitt. FaceTiming or video chatting or Skyping or Zooming or whatever the social networking content is, how you keep in touch with them. So yeah, I'm not going to really not really going to talk too much about friendships. But yeah, okay. So that is that. I'm going to start my video here. And how long is this? Oh, it never tells me how long it is. Won't know until I have to upload it. So chapter 9, all done. And you have 2 assignments that are due or actually 3 things that are due on Sunday, the chapter 9 assignments and also your exam. So that should do it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I will talk to you all later.